They were separated by oceans, by millennia, by entire civilizations that rose and fell without ever knowing the other existed. From the misty mountains of ancient China to the frozen fjords of the Norse, from the jungles of the Maya to the deserts of Mesopotamia. Yet somehow they all drew the same monster, a creature with scales like armor, teeth like daggers, and the power to command the very elements. They called it by different names, the Wyrm, the Naga, the Long, the Serpent, but we know it by one, the Dragon. How is this possible? This isn't a case of a single story told around a campfire that slowly spread across the globe. The timelines don't match. The geography is impossible. These cultures were utterly isolated from one another. So how did they all independently dream up the same magnificent, terrifying beast? This is not a question about mythology. It's a question about the human mind. It's a detective story where the clues are buried in our oldest fears, our deepest psychology, and perhaps a hidden memory etched into our very DNA. The answer is more shocking than the creature itself, and it forces us to ask a deeply unsettling question. What if the dragon isn't a myth at all but a memory? To find the origin of the dragon, you have to look past the fire and the wings. You have to strip it down to its chassis, its primal blueprint. And when you do, you are left with one creature. The one animal that has haunted humanity since we first climbed down from the trees. The serpent. There is a reason the fear of snakes is one of the most common phobias on Earth. It's not learned, it's wired into us. In our primate brain, the slithering, coiling form of a snake is a biological red alert. For millions of years of evolution, it was the silent, venomous death hiding in the grass. It represents a unique kind of terror. The enemy that is low to the ground, that strikes from below, a threat from the earth itself. It is a symbol of chaos, of the unpredictable danger lurking just beyond the safety of the firelight. Ancient cultures felt this primal fear, and they elevated it to the divine. In Aboriginal Australia, the rainbow serpent is one of the oldest continuously worshipped deities on the planet, a creator god that shaped the rivers and the mountains. In ancient India, the Naga were powerful serpent beings, sometimes benevolent, sometimes terrifying, who lived in magnificent underwater palaces and guarded the treasures of the earth. And in ancient Egypt, the serpent was the ultimate enemy of creation itself. But a snake, however feared, is not a dragon. It's only the first piece of the puzzle. Our ancestors faced another mortal threat, one that came not from the ground but from the sky. The eagle, the hawk, the great birds of prey. To a primitive human, these were winged death. They could appear from nowhere, their shadows racing across the ground a split second before their talons struck. They were masters of the air, a domain humans could only gaze upon with fear and wonder. Now, imagine the terrified genius of the primitive mind. What is the ultimate predator? What is the most horrifying monster you could possibly conceive? You take the slithering, venomous terror from the ground, and you combine it with the winged, sharp-to-lone death from the sky. You create a hybrid, a super predator that owns both the earth and the air. You've just created the first dragon, a creature that embodies all our ancestral fears in one perfect lethal package. This isn't just a theory. We can see it happening step by step in the cradle of civilization itself, Mesopotamia. Here, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, humanity built its first cities, wrote its first laws, and recorded its first myths. And in their oldest story, the epic of creation known as the Enuma Elish, we find the mother of all dragons. Her name was Tiamat. Tiamat wasn't a creature you could fight. She was a force of nature, a vast saltwater sea serpent, the embodiment of primordial chaos. She was creation before it was organized, the raw, untamed power of the universe. When the younger gods, like the storm god Marduk, tried to bring order to the cosmos, Tiamat declared war. She didn't fight alone. From her body, she spawned a legion of monsters, vipers, scorpion men, and fearsome beasts the likes of which the world had never seen. The battle between Marduk and Tiamat wasn't just a fantasy story for the Babylonians. It was the explanation for their entire existence. It was the symbolic story of civilization itself, order, represented by the god Marduk, battling the untamable chaos of nature, represented by the great serpent Tiamat. When Marduk finally slays her, he splits her massive serpentine body in two. From one half he creates the heavens, from the other he creates the earth. The very world the Babylonians lived in was built from the corpse of the first dragon. Tiamat was a cosmic entity, but the Mesopotamians also had dragons that walked among them, or at least on their walls. Look at the Ishtar Gate, the magnificent blue-tiled entrance to the ancient city of Babylon. Guarding the gate, alongside lions and bulls, is a creature known as the Meshusu. Its name translates to furious snake. It has the long scaly body and forked tongue of a serpent, the front legs of a lion, the back legs of an eagle, and a horned head. It is the perfect composite predator, a living, breathing symbol of divine power and terror. For the people of Babylon, the dragon wasn't a fairy tale. It was a real, tangible part of their world, a symbol of power etched into the very stones of their city. Thousands of miles away, separated by a vast and unforgiving desert, another civilization was wrestling with its own serpent of chaos. In ancient Egypt, the world was a delicate balance, a constant struggle between order, or Ma'at, and chaos, or Isfet. And the ultimate embodiment of that chaos was a dragon named Apep. Apep was an immense serpent, said to be miles long, who lived in the darkness of the underworld. His sole purpose was to devour the sun. Every single night, as the sun god Ra sailed his barge through the underworld to prepare for the dawn, Apep would attack. The entire Egyptian religion, with its complex rituals and pantheon of gods, was in many ways a massive magical operation designed for one purpose: to help Ra defeat Apep and ensure the sun would rise the next morning. The storms, the earthquakes, the solar eclipses, the Egyptians saw these as evidence that Apep was winning the battle. His roar was the thunder. When he was wounded, his blood falling from the sky turned into hail. This was not a monster that could be killed once and for all like Tiamat. Apep was an eternal, recurring threat. The battle against him was fought every night, for all of eternity. The dragon was, for the Egyptians, the physical manifestation of the end of the world, a cosmic serpent locked in an endless war with the sun itself. So we have the primal fear of the snake. We have the addition of parts from other apex predators. We see this blueprint give rise to the chaos serpents of Mesopotamia and Egypt, the first true dragons of human history. They are gods, cosmic forces, personifications of the violent, untamable world our ancestors struggled to survive in. But these are not the dragons we know today. The four-legged, winged, fire-breathing beast that hoards gold in a mountain cave? Or the wise, benevolent serpent that brings rain and good fortune in the east? Those are different creatures entirely. They are an evolution. The story of how this primordial chaos serpent split, evolving down two completely different paths on opposite sides of the world, is the story of how humanity itself split. How two halves of the globe developed fundamentally different ways of looking at nature, at power, and at the world. One culture would come to see the dragon as the ultimate enemy, a symbol of greed and evil to be conquered. The other would see it as the ultimate ally, a symbol of wisdom and strength to be revered. How did this happen? How did one single ancient fear give birth to two such profoundly different icons? The answer takes us away from the deserts of the ancient Near East, and into the cold forests of Europe, and the imperial courts of ancient China, where the dragon was about to be reborn. In the frost-rimmed sagas of the Norsemen, the dragon was not a celestial chaos god, but something far more personal, far more insidious. It was a creature born not of primordial sludge, but of human greed. The most infamous of these was Fafnir. Fafnir wasn't born a monster. He was a dwarf, son of a king, who, along with his brother, murdered his own father for a cursed hoard of gold. To guard this treasure, his soul twisted, his body warped, and his heart turned to stone. He became a dragon, a great serpent, his scales as impenetrable as his avarice. He didn't rule the sky. He slithered in a cave, sleeping on a pile of glittering, useless wealth. The dragon of Northern Europe was a symbol of corruption, the ultimate cautionary tale against greed. To defeat Fafnir was the hero Sigurd's destiny, but this was no simple battle of good versus evil. Sigurd had to use cunning, digging a pit on the dragon's path to its watering hole and striking from below, piercing the beast's soft underbelly. And when Fafnir's black blood spilled over him, something magical happened. A drop touched his tongue, and suddenly he could understand the language of the birds. They warned him of his own companion's treachery. In this myth, the dragon's power, its very essence, contains a hidden knowledge. By conquering the beast of greed, the hero gains a deeper wisdom, an insight into the world. The treasure wasn't just the gold. It was the enlightenment that came from defeating the monster within. Centuries later, on the misty shores of Anglo-Saxon England, another hero would face another dragon. In the epic poem Beowulf, the dragon is a different kind of evil. It is ancient, primordial. It has slept for 300 years inside a barrow, a burial mound, coiled around the forgotten treasure of a long-dead tribe. This dragon is not born of greed, but is the embodiment of it. It is a guardian, a force of nature. It is only when a single golden cup is stolen from its hoard by a runaway slave that its fury is unleashed. This isn't a battle for glory. It's a desperate defense. The dragon wakes and breathes fire, not out of malice, but out of a primal territorial rage. It burns villages, melts homes, and scorches the very earth. It is a walking apocalypse. An aging Beowulf, now a king, knows this is his final fight. He faces the dragon not for treasure, but to save his people. Their battle is legendary, a clash of iron and fire, of aging hero and ancient beast. Beowulf slays the dragon, but is mortally wounded in the process. They die together. The treasure, now doubly cursed by the dragon's rage and the death of a king, is buried with Beowulf. It is worthless. This story tells us something profound about the European dragon. It is the end. It is the final test, the personification of death itself, and its treasure is nothing but a prelude to ruin. From the greedy Fafnir to Beowulf's fiery doom, the Western dragon was cemented as a chthonic monster, a creature of the earth. It lived in caves, burrows, and dark lairs. It hoarded gold. It was a solitary, malevolent force that represented the greatest sins: greed, wrath, and destruction. It was the ultimate adversary, the obstacle a hero had to conquer to prove his worth, to restore order, and to protect civilization from the savage wilderness. It was a monster to be slain, but halfway across the world, an entirely different story was being told. What if the dragon wasn't a monster to be slain? What if it was a force to be revered? What if its power wasn't a destructive fire, but the life-giving rain? In the river valleys of ancient China, the dragon or long was taking shape, and it couldn't be more different. This was no scaly, winged lizard. The Chinese dragon was a divine chimera, a magnificent composite of 9 different animals. It had the head of a camel, the horns of a stag, the eyes of a demon, the ears of a cow, the neck of a snake, the belly of a clam, the scales of a carp, the claws of an eagle, and the paws of a tiger. It had no wings, yet it flew through the clouds. It did not breathe fire. It breathed mist and summoned rain. The long was not a creature of the earth, but of the sky and the water. It was a celestial being, a master of transformation, able to shrink to the size of a silkworm or expand to fill the entire space between heaven and earth. In an agrarian society utterly dependent on seasonal rains and the temper of its great rivers, the entity that controlled water was no monster. It was a god. The dragon was the ultimate symbol of Yang, the active, masculine, and creative principle of the universe. It was a bringer of prosperity, good fortune, and most importantly, life-giving water. People didn't build fortresses against dragons. They built temples for them, praying for their favor, for gentle rains to nourish their crops, and for protection from devastating floods. The dragon wasn't a symbol of chaos. It was a symbol of divine, cosmic order. This reverence reached its absolute peak with the rise of the emperor. The Emperor of China was known as the Son of Heaven, the divine intermediary between the celestial realm and the mortal world. And his personal symbol? The dragon. But not just any dragon. The imperial dragon was a specific, immensely powerful being, distinguished by one critical feature. It had 5 claws on each foot. Other, lesser dragons might have 3 or 4, but the 5-clawed dragon was the exclusive property of the emperor himself. To see it embroidered on robes, carved into the architecture of the Forbidden City, or painted on fine porcelain was to see a direct symbol of the emperor's divine right to rule. The dragon throne was the center of the world. The dragon represented not a challenge to authority, but the very source of it. It was a symbol of a wise, powerful, and benevolent ruler who, like the dragon, brought prosperity and order to the land. So why the profound difference? How could one creature inspire such terror in one culture and such reverence in another? The answer lies in 2 fundamentally different worldviews. The Western tradition, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to Beowulf, often framed humanity's story as a struggle against the chaotic forces of nature. Nature was something to be tamed, conquered. The dragon, as a symbol of that untamed wilderness and its destructive power, had to be defeated for civilization to thrive. The hero slays the dragon, and order is restored. In the East, particularly within the Taoist and Confucian traditions of China, the goal was not conquest but harmony. Humanity was not separate from nature, but a part of its intricate web. The universe operated according to a cosmic balance, a flow of energy. The dragon was one of the most powerful manifestations of this energy. It was a force of nature, yes, but not an inherently evil one. It was a power to be respected, understood, and harmonized with. You didn't kill the dragon. You honored it, so that its immense power would flow in your favor. It was the ultimate expression of nature's majesty, not its monstrosity. Two branches of the same ancient fear, growing into two completely different beasts. In the west, a greedy fire-breathing terror lurking in the darkness. In the east, a wise celestial spirit soaring through the clouds. One a symbol of the devil, the other a symbol of the divine. As these two worlds began to interact, and as a new religion began to sweep across Europe, this divergence would become a chasm. The battle lines were drawn. In the west, the dragon became the ultimate enemy of God. In the east, it became his divine messenger. And this global schism would cement the dragon's fate for the next 2,000 years. In the west, the path was paved with fear and fire. Before the dragon became the devil, it was first a monster of the old world, a creature of chaos. The ancient Greeks called it draken, a word that simply meant giant serpent. It didn't always have wings, it didn't always breathe fire, but it was always a guardian, a terrible primeval gatekeeper. Think of the myths. The colossal serpent Python, born from the mud of the Great Flood, guarded the sacred oracle at Delphi. It was a child of the earth, a voice of primordial power. And the new god, the sun god Apollo, had to kill it to establish his own temple, his new order. It was a battle between the old world and the new, between chaos and civilization, and the hero's victory was civilization's triumph. Look at the Hydra, the many-headed serpent of Lerna. For every head Heracles severed, two more would grow. It was a symbol of problems that multiply, of challenges that seem insurmountable. It had to be conquered through strength and ingenuity. A monster slain to prove the hero's worth, or the sleepless dragon that guarded the golden fleece. A treasure so divine it required a supernatural guardian. To claim the prize, the hero Jason couldn't just fight it. He had to lull it to sleep, outsmarting the ancient power. In every case, the Western dragon was an obstacle. It was the ultimate test. A monstrous force of nature that hoarded treasure, guarded sacred sites, or held civilization at bay. To be a hero was to kill the dragon. This idea of hero versus monster became a foundation of Western storytelling. Even the Romans, pragmatic and militaristic, saw this power. They adopted the Draco, a dragon standard with a hollow metal head and a long silk tail, for their cavalry units. As the rider charged, air would rush through the dragon's head, making the tail whip and hiss like a living creature. It was a terrifying sight, a symbol of pagan ferocity and power. But it was a power to be wielded, a beast to be tamed and aimed at one's enemies. The dragon was a weapon, not a god. And then everything changed. A single book, written in exile on a Greek island, would take this mythological monster and cast it in a new terrifying role. The Book of Revelation. In its apocalyptic visions, a new dragon appeared. A great red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns. A creature so powerful it sweeps a third of the stars from the sky with its tail. But this was no mere monster guarding a treasure. The text gives it a name. It is that ancient serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. That was it. The connection was made. The die was cast. The dragon was no longer just a symbol of chaos or a pagan foe. It was now and forevermore in the Western Christian tradition, the literal embodiment of cosmic evil, the adversary of God himself. Every snake, every serpent, every dragon from every old myth was retroactively seen through this new lens. The serpent in the Garden of Eden? A dragon in disguise. The Leviathan from the Book of Job? A proto-dragon. The dragon became the ultimate villain, the enemy of all that was good and holy. To fight a dragon was to fight Satan himself. But while the West was busy casting its dragon into the pits of hell, halfway across the world, an entirely different story was unfolding. A story not of conflict but of harmony. In China, the dragon, the Long, was never a monster. It was a divine, auspicious creature. A force of nature, yes, but a benevolent one. Where the Western dragon was often associated with fire and destruction, the Eastern dragon was the master of water. It commanded the rivers, the lakes, the seas, and most importantly, the rain. In a vast, agrarian society built on the whims of the monsoon and the flooding of great rivers like the Yangtze and the Yellow, the creature that controlled the water was not a monster to be slain. It was a power to be respected, worshipped, and appeased. The Chinese dragon was a composite being, a beautiful tapestry of the animal kingdom. It had the head of a camel, the horns of a deer, the eyes of a demon, the neck of a snake, the belly of a clam, the scales of a carp, the claws of an eagle, and the paws of a tiger. It was a fusion of all the powers of the natural world into one magnificent being. It was a symbol of the yang principle, the active, masculine, creative force of the universe. There was no single monstrous dragon. Instead, there was a celestial bureaucracy of them. The 4 dragon kings, each ruling over one of the 4 seas of China, were deities who reported directly to the Jade Emperor, the ruler of heaven. They weren't chaotic beasts, they were divine officials. Farmers would build temples to them, praying for gentle, life-giving rains and protection from devastating floods. The dragon wasn't an enemy to be conquered. It was a powerful neighbor you wanted to keep happy. And this reverence for the dragon reached its absolute zenith with the ultimate authority figure, the emperor himself. Starting with the Han Dynasty over 2,000 years ago, the dragon became the exclusive symbol of imperial power. The emperor was not a dragon slayer. He was the dragon. He was considered the son of heaven, the human intermediary between the divine realm and the mortal world. And his symbol was the 5-clawed yellow dragon. Yellow was the color of the emperor, the center of the earth. And the 5 claws represented his total command over the earthly realm. This symbolism was not taken lightly. It was law. Only the emperor could wear robes embroidered with the 5-clawed dragon. Only his palaces could be adorned with its image. Anyone else caught using this specific iconography would be executed for treason. It was a claim to divinity, a statement that the emperor ruled with the power and wisdom of the dragon itself. While a Western king might prove his divine right by slaying a dragon, the Chinese emperor proved his by embodying it. So you see the chasm widening. In the West, a man proves his virtue by killing the dragon. He is a saint, a hero, a king. Saint George, Saint Michael, Apollo, Heracles, their legends are built on the corpse of a dragon. It is a story of conquest, of man versus nature, of good versus evil. In the East, a man proves his wisdom by honoring the dragon. He is a sage, a farmer, an emperor. His power comes not from destroying the dragon, but from harmonizing with its cosmic force. The Dragon Boat Festival, the Dragon Dance at New Year. These are not acts of defiance, but of celebration and partnership. It is a story of balance, of humanity and nature, of order and celestial power. This fundamental split would color every story, every myth, and every piece of art for centuries to come. In the West, the age of the Dragon Slayer was dawning, forging heroes in fire and blood. In the East, emperors would wrap themselves in the dragon's coils, building empires that would last for millennia. 2 separate worlds, creating 2 profoundly different beasts from the same ancient clay. One a monster to be vanquished, the other a god to be revered. And in the coming centuries, the stories they inspired would shape the very soul of their civilizations. This fundamental schism in mythology begs the question, why? Why did one half of the world look to the skies and see a beast of pure malice, while the other saw a bringer of fortune and rain? The answer isn't found in fossils or ancient bones, but in the very soil of their beliefs, in the philosophies that watered the roots of their civilizations. Let's journey west, into the heart of a Europe taking its first steps out of the classical era. Here, a new faith was taking hold, one with a powerful and defining story of creation. And in that story, at the very beginning, is a serpent, a tempter, a creature that whispers deceit in the cradle of humanity, leading to a fall from grace. This single act branded the serpentine form with a permanent stain of corruption, of primordial evil. The dragon, in its most basic reptilian shape, became the serpent's ultimate evolution. It was the devil made manifest, the embodiment of chaos clawing at the walls of God's ordered world. This idea echoes in the epic descriptions of Leviathan, the great sea serpent of the Old Testament, a creature so immense and terrifying that only God himself could tame it. It wasn't just an animal, it was a symbol of the untamable, godless abyss. When the book of Revelation was written, the connection was made explicit. The great enemy of creation is described as the great dragon, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan. There was no ambiguity. The dragon was not a morally gray creature of nature, it was the adversary. And in a world where faith was the ultimate virtue, what is the greatest act of faith? To confront the adversary, to face down evil and destroy it. The dragon became the perfect foil for a new kind of hero, the saint, the holy knight. It was no longer enough to be strong like Hercules, a hero now had to be pure. The dragon was the ultimate test of that purity. No story captures this better than that of St. George. The legend tells of a city in Libya, Cyllene, terrorized by a dragon that had poisoned their water source. To appease it, the villagers first fed it their livestock, and when that ran out, they began sacrificing their own people, chosen by lottery. One day, the lot falls to the king's own daughter. As the princess is led to her doom, George, a Roman soldier of Christian faith, rides by. He sees her terror, learns of the city's plight, and sees not a monster, but a manifestation of pagan darkness that must be cleansed. He confronts the beast, not just with his lance, but with the sign of the cross. He wounds the dragon, tames it with the princess's girdle, and leads it, humbled, back into the city. He doesn't just kill it. He shows the people that their pagan monster is powerless against his faith. Only then, after the entire city agrees to be baptized, does he strike the killing blow. The message was thunderously clear. The dragon is chaos. The dragon is paganism. The hero, armed with faith and virtue, is the agent of divine order. This narrative template was stamped onto the European consciousness. From the epic poem of Beowulf, who faces his final, fatal test against a treasure-hoarding fire drake, to the Norse sagas of Sigurd, who slays the dragon Fafnir to claim a cursed hoard of gold, the theme is consistent. The dragon is an obstacle. It is a thing of greed, of wrath, of destruction. It is a problem to be solved with the sharp end of a sword. It is the ultimate monster, and the world is made better, safer, and holier by its death. Now let's leave this world of fire and brimstone and travel east, across continents, to a land shaped not by arid deserts and rocky shores, but by the immense life-giving power of great rivers, the Yellow, the Yangtze. In ancient China, the single most important force of nature was water. Too little and you had famine. Too much and you had catastrophic floods. Survival depended on a delicate, terrifying balance. And the masters of that balance, the divine beings who commanded the rain, the rivers, the lakes, and the seas, were the dragons. The Chinese long is a world away from the Western Debuarm. It has the head of a camel, the horns of a stag, the eyes of a demon, the neck of a snake, the belly of a clam, the scales of a carp, the claws of an eagle, and the paws of a tiger. It is a divine chimera, a composite of all creation, signifying its dominion over the natural world. Critically, it has no wings, yet it soars through the clouds. It doesn't breathe fire. It breathes clouds, summoning the rain. To slay a Chinese dragon would be an act of utter madness. It would be like stabbing the sky and expecting it not to fall. You would be inviting drought, famine, and death. Instead of being slain, the Long was revered. It was honored. Temples were built, and offerings were made to appease the dragon kings who were set to rule the four seas. People prayed to them for rain in times of drought and for mercy in times of flood. They were seen as powerful, wise, and fundamentally just, but also capricious and terrifying, like nature itself. They weren't good or evil in a human sense. They were a cosmic force. This deep reverence for the dragon elevated it to the highest symbol of power and fortune. It became inextricably linked with the ultimate authority on earth, the emperor himself. The emperor was the son of heaven, the divine mediator between the celestial realm and the mortal world. His symbol was the five-clawed golden dragon. His throne was the dragon throne. His face was the dragon face. To even look upon it was a privilege. The dragon wasn't a monster for a hero to kill. It was the emblem of the hero himself, the ultimate symbol of imperial power, divine right, and cosmic harmony. So we see the two paths born from two different worlds. In the West, where the dominant philosophy centered on a struggle between a singular god and a singular devil, humanity versus a fallen natural world, the dragon became the ultimate enemy. It was a test for the individual, a physical manifestation of sin to be conquered, proving one's personal virtue and faith. In the East, where philosophies like Taoism emphasize balance, flow, and harmony with the forces of nature, the dragon became the ultimate symbol of that nature. It was a test for the community, a powerful force to be understood, respected, and appeased, proving society's collective wisdom and ability to live in balance with the cosmos. One culture forged a hero who slays the dragon to save the people. The other forged a hero who honors the dragon to save the people. These two opposing ideas, the dragon as demonic foe and the dragon as divine ally, would crystallize over centuries. But they wouldn't remain isolated forever. As the world began to shrink, as trade routes opened and explorers set sail, these stories, these profoundly different beasts would begin to travel. And when the fire-breathing monster of the West finally met the celestial rain god of the East, the myth of the dragon would be transformed once again. This clash of titans, this meeting of mythologies, wasn't a single event. It was a slow, creeping fusion, carried in the minds of merchants on the Silk Road and sailors charting terrifying new oceans. Imagine a Venetian trader in the court of Kublai Khan, hearing tales of the divine lung, a serpentine bringer of fortune and rain. How does he process this? He has no frame of reference for a good dragon. Back home, the dragon is a creature of malice, a hoarder of gold, a devourer of virgins. His mind would instinctively try to translate the story, filtering it through a Western lens. The lung's immense power might be reinterpreted as a threat. Its serpentine form, a symbol of divinity in the East, would echo the form of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the ultimate symbol of temptation and evil in his own culture. The story he brings back to Europe is a distorted reflection, a garbled message. He might speak of powerful, magical serpents in the Orient, but the nuance is lost. To his audience, a powerful serpent is simply a more dangerous monster. This wasn't a malicious rewriting of the narrative. It was the inevitable consequence of two completely separate symbolic languages colliding. The Eastern dragon's wisdom became cunning. Its celestial authority became tyrannical power. Its control over water, a life-giving force, was overshadowed by the Western obsession with fire and destruction. And the cultural exchange was not a one-way street. As European influence, backed by cannons and galleons, began to spread, their stories traveled with them. How would a Chinese scholar, steeped in millennia of reverence for the dragon as an ancestor and symbol of imperial harmony, react to the tale of St. George? The story would be grotesque, almost blasphemous. To them, a man spearing a dragon isn't a hero. He's a fool, a vandal attacking a sacred force of nature. He is killing the rain. He is destroying luck. He is committing a profound act of cosmic imbalance. The Western hero, celebrated for slaying the beast, would be seen as a brutish thug, utterly ignorant of the world's true workings. This fundamental misunderstanding solidified the two archetypes. In the West, the dragon became ever more entrenched as the ultimate adversary. This was the age of heraldry, where the dragon became a potent symbol on shields and banners. But what it symbolized was complex. To have a dragon on your coat of arms meant you were ferocious, terrifying in battle, a force to be reckoned with. It was the power of the monster, tamed and wielded by a noble house. The famous red dragon of Wales, Y Drake Gotch, became a symbol of a nation's fierce spirit of resistance. The dragon was a mark of terrifying power, a thing you either conquered to prove your worth, or whose ferocity you adopted as your own. It was a challenge. In the East, the dragon was never a challenge to be overcome. It was the ultimate symbol of the emperor himself. The emperor was the son of heaven, and the dragon was his divine counterpart on earth. The five-clawed dragon was a symbol reserved exclusively for the emperor. To use it was an act of treason, punishable by death. It wasn't about wielding the dragon's power. It was about being a worthy vessel for the divine authority the dragon represented. You didn't put a dragon on your shield to show how tough you were. You embroidered it on your robes to show you were in harmony with the cosmos. One culture sought to conquer the beast, the other sought to emulate the god. As the age of exploration bled into the age of enlightenment, a new force entered the fray: science. For the first time, humanity began a systematic attempt to catalog and understand the natural world. And in this new rational world, where did the dragon fit? For a surprisingly long time, it was treated as just another animal waiting to be discovered. Mapmakers charting the vast, terrifying emptiness of the oceans famously scribbled "Hic sunt dragons," "Here be dragons," in the uncharted territories. This wasn't just a whimsical warning, it was a literal one. They believed giant sea serpents and other draconic creatures lurked beneath the waves. Every sailor's tale of a kraken or a monster of the deep reinforced this belief. The dragon was pushed to the edges of the known world, but it was still in the world. Naturalists like the 16th century Swiss scholar Conrad Gessner, in his monumental work Historia Animalium, listed dragons right alongside eagles, lions, and insects. He included detailed illustrations and descriptions, treating them with the same scientific seriousness as a common lizard. He distinguished between different types: winged dragons, serpentine dragons, land and sea dragons. To him, and to many of his contemporaries, dragons weren't myth. They were simply a very rare and very dangerous species. This belief was bolstered by startling discoveries being unearthed from the ground itself. All across the world, massive unidentifiable bones were being found. What else could the colossal skull of a triceratops or the fossilized skeleton of a woolly mammoth be, if not the remains of a dragon? In China, these dragon bones were ground into powder and used in traditional medicine for centuries. In Europe, they were displayed in cathedrals as proof of the monsters slain by saints. The fossil record, which would one day give rise to the science of paleontology, was for a time the ultimate proof of the dragon's existence. The dragon had a fossil record. It had a place in the great chain of being. But science is a relentless force. As explorers filled in the blank spaces on the map, they found lions and elephants and rhinos, but they found no dragons. As geologists and paleontologists began to correctly identify the giant bones of extinct animals, the dragon's physical proof crumbled. The world was becoming known, measured, and categorized, and there was simply no room left for a fire-breathing reptile the size of a house. Here be dragons became a metaphor for the unknown, not a literal statement of fact. The dragon was being evicted from the natural world. It could no longer live in the mountains because we had climbed them. It could no longer live in the seas because we had charted them. It could no longer live in the past because its bones had been given a new name: dinosaur. Pushed from the realm of zoology and geography, the dragon had only one place left to go: inside the human mind. It retreated from the physical world into the world of allegory and fantasy. It became a symbol for greed in stories of knights and hoarded treasure. It became a metaphor for paganism, for heresy, for all the things the church sought to conquer. It was no longer a creature you might actually encounter on a journey. It was an idea, a concept, a powerful piece of our collective imagination. Stripped of its physical reality, the dragon should have faded away, becoming a quaint relic like the griffin or the manticore. But it didn't. Freed from the constraints of biology and the limitations of the known world, the dragon became more potent, more flexible, and more powerful than ever before. It was no longer an animal, it was an archetype. And in the fertile, boundless soil of human imagination, this archetype was about to undergo its most dramatic transformation yet. As the Roman Empire crumbled and a new faith swept across Europe, the dragon was conscripted for a new war. A war for the very soul of humanity. This transformation wasn't driven by explorers finding new beasts, or by scholars unearthing ancient bones. It was driven by an idea so powerful it would redefine the Western world and cast the dragon in its most infamous role: the literal embodiment of evil. This new force was, of course, Christianity. And for the early church, the world was a battlefield between good and evil, God and Satan. They needed a symbol for their ultimate adversary, a creature that could encapsulate pure malice, temptation, and the ancient pagan world they sought to supplant. They found the perfect candidate in the serpentine monsters of old. The connection was made explicit in the final book of the Bible, the Book of Revelation. There, a cosmic war unfolds, and the enemy is described in no uncertain terms: the great dragon, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. That was it. The die was cast. The dragon was no longer just a monster, a guardian of treasure, or a chaotic force of nature. It was now fused inseparably with the Christian concept of the devil. Every scaly coil, every venomous fang, every plume of hellish fire was now a direct representation of sin and damnation. The dragon became the ultimate antagonist in a grand spiritual drama. And every great drama needs a hero. Enter the dragon slayer. Not as a warrior seeking glory, but as a saint seeking to prove the power of God. And no story better illustrates this transformation than that of St. George. The legend, which truly took hold in the High Middle Ages, is one we all think we know. A knight, a dragon, a princess. But its power lies in the symbolism. The story isn't about killing a big lizard. It's an allegory for the triumph of Christian faith over pagan evil. The tale is set in a city, often in Libya, tormented by a dragon that has poisoned the local water supply. To appease the beast, the townspeople offer it sheep, and when the sheep run out, they begin to offer it their own children, chosen by lottery. One day, the lot falls to the king's own daughter. The king, distraught, offers all his gold and silver to save her, but the people refuse. Their children died, so must his. The princess is dressed as a bride and led out to the lake to be devoured. This is where George, a Roman soldier of Christian faith, rides in. He sees the weeping princess and asks what's wrong. When she explains, he vows to save her in the name of Christ. He confronts the dragon, making the sign of the cross. He doesn't just charge in and hack it to pieces. In the most popular versions of the story, he wounds the beast with his lance, then instructs the princess to throw her girdle, a type of belt, around its neck. Miraculously, the dragon becomes as meek as a lamb, and she leads it back into the city on a leash. The symbolism here is breathtaking. The dragon isn't just killed, it's tamed. It's subjugated by the power of a Christian knight and the purity of the maiden. The girdle, a symbol of feminine virtue and purity, becomes the chain that binds evil. When they arrive in the city, the people are terrified. But George tells them not to be afraid. He promises to kill the beast for good if they will all convert to Christianity and be baptized. The king and all his people agree, and only then does George draw his sword and slay the dragon. This story became a medieval blockbuster. It was cemented in the Western consciousness by a 13th century book called The Golden Legend, a collection of saints' lives that was one of the most widely read books of its time, second only to the Bible. It codified the story of St. George and the dragon and spread it to every corner of Christendom. The message was clear and powerful. The dragon is paganism. The dragon is heresy. The dragon is sin itself, poisoning the well of life. The maiden is the church, or the innocent soul offered up for sacrifice. And the knight, the Christian soldier, is the agent of God who, through faith, can not only defeat evil but convert the masses and lead them to salvation. This archetype, the holy warrior vanquishing a draconic foe, wasn't limited to George. The archangel Michael himself was depicted casting the dragon, Satan, from heaven. Other saints, like Saint Margaret of Antioch, were said to have faced dragons in their cells, symbolizing their personal battles against temptation. The dragon had become a universal test, a physical manifestation of the spiritual trials that every good Christian must face and overcome. This profound shift in meaning demanded a shift in appearance. The dragon's form began to standardize across Europe, crystallizing into the creature we recognize today. It was a composite beast built from theological terror. It had the body of a great serpent or lizard, linking it back to the tempter in the Garden of Eden. It was given bat-like wings, not the feathered wings of an angel, but the leathery, demonic wings of a creature of the night. And most importantly, it breathed fire. Fire had always been a destructive element, but now it was explicitly the fire of hell. The dragon's breath was a literal taste of damnation. Its intelligence was also reframed. The ancient dragons were often wise or cunning in a primal, immoral way. The medieval dragon's intelligence was twisted into satanic malevolence. It was a creature of pure spite, hoarding gold not for its own use, but to lure greedy men to their doom. It represented avarice, gluttony, and wrath, all deadly sins. It was no longer just a creature to be feared. It was a creature to be hated. It was the enemy of God and man, a blight upon the created world that had to be exterminated. This was the dragon's great trial by fire. It was dragged from the murky swamps of folklore and thrust onto the center stage of a cosmic battle. It was branded, reshaped, and given a new and terrible purpose. For 1,000 years, this would be the dominant image of the dragon in the West. A monstrous, irredeemable foe whose death was a cause for celebration, a victory for the light. The age of the heroic dragon slayer had begun, and the fields of Europe in art, song, and story would run red with dragon's blood. But even as this vision of the dragon as ultimate evil was being perfected in Europe, a world away on the other side of the planet, the very same archetype was evolving in a completely different direction. There, the dragon wasn't a creature to be slain, but one to be revered. It wasn't a symbol of demonic evil, but of divine power, wisdom, and incredible good fortune. Across the vast expanse of Asia, this divine creature was known by many names, but its most iconic form first coiled into existence in the river valleys of ancient China. This was the Long, and if your image of a dragon is a fire-breathing, winged beast perched on a mountain of gold, Then prepare to have that image completely shattered. The Chinese long has no wings, yet it soars through the clouds. It doesn't breathe fire, it commands the rain. It doesn't hoard treasure, it is the treasure. A symbol of imperial power so sacred that for centuries, only the emperor himself was permitted to use its image. This isn't a simple monster. The long is a divine chimera, a glorious combination of 9 different animals, representing its dominion over the entire natural world. Look closely at the ancient depictions. It has the head of a camel, the sinuous neck and body of a snake, and the belly of a clam, allowing it to move with impossible grace. Its scales are not those of a reptile, but of a carp, shimmering with the life of the river. It wears the horns of a stag, a connection to the forest. It has the ears of a cow, the paws of a tiger, and the sharp, powerful claws of an eagle. Its eyes, sometimes said to be those of a demon or a rabbit, hold an ancient, unnerving intelligence. This creature is not a mistake of nature. It is the unification of it. It represents the harmony of the cosmos, a being that is part earth, part water, and part sky. Unlike its European cousin, whose element is destructive fire, the long is the undisputed master of water. It is a hydrokinetic deity, a bringer of rain, a controller of rivers, a ruler of seas, and a guardian of floods. In an agrarian civilization like China, where the success of the harvest, and therefore the survival of the people, depended entirely on predictable rainfall and controlled rivers, the being that governed water was not a monster to be feared. It was a god to be worshipped. A good year with gentle rains and a bountiful harvest was a sign of the dragon's favor. A year of drought or devastating floods was a terrifying display of its wrath. This connection to life-giving water is why the dragon became the ultimate symbol of the emperor, the son of heaven. The emperor was the intermediary between the divine and the mortal realm, and his duty was to maintain cosmic balance and ensure the prosperity of his people. By adopting the 5-clawed golden dragon as his personal emblem, he was visually declaring his divine mandate to rule. His throne was the dragon throne. His face was the dragon face. To be born with a birthmark was to be marked by the dragon. The dragon's power was the emperor's power, a force not of brute strength, but of cosmic authority and life-sustaining benevolence. This grand authority was personified in the mythology of the 4 dragon kings, the Sihai Longwang. These 4 divine brothers were believed to rule over the 4 seas of China, each corresponding to a cardinal direction. Ao Guang ruled the East Sea, Ao Qin the South Sea, Ao Run the West Sea, and Ao Shun the North Sea. They lived in magnificent crystal palaces on the ocean floor, commanding armies of shrimp soldiers and crab generals. They weren't just abstract concepts, they were characters in epic stories, like the classic novel Journey to the West. Mortals would build temples to them, pray to them for rain, and make offerings to appease their anger. They were the divine bureaucrats of the heavens, managing the world's water supply with the power to bring fortune or disaster on a whim. And that's the crucial duality of the Eastern dragon. It is overwhelmingly a force for good. The famous dragon dance performed during the Lunar New Year isn't a reenactment of a battle. It's a joyful ceremony to scare away evil spirits and summon luck and prosperity for the coming year. The longer the dancing dragon, the more luck it will bring. The dragon is a symbol of strength, of success, of ambition. To say a child is a dragon is the highest compliment, wishing them a future of greatness. The year of the dragon in the Chinese zodiac is considered the most auspicious time to be born. But this benevolence should never be mistaken for weakness. The long is not a pet. It is a primal force of nature, as unpredictable and awe-inspiring as a thunderstorm. It is wise and just, but it demands respect. An ancient Chinese proverb warns, "Do not insult the dragon, for you are crunchy and taste good with ketchup." While the ketchup part is a modern addition, the sentiment is timeless. To anger a dragon was to invite cataclysm. They were the guardians of cosmic order, and those who disrupted that order, whether through greed, arrogance, or disrespect for nature, would face the full, terrifying force of a typhoon or a flash flood. Perhaps the most profound difference between the dragons of East and West lies in what they pursue. The Western dragon hoards gold, a symbol of material wealth and earthly greed. The Eastern dragon, however, is almost always depicted chasing or clutching a single luminous orb, often wreathed in flames. This is not a jewel. It is the flaming pearl of wisdom. This pearl represents spiritual energy, truth, and enlightenment. It is the essence of the cosmos, containing immense power and knowledge. The dragon's constant pursuit of this pearl is a powerful metaphor for the perpetual quest for wisdom and perfection. The dragon doesn't want to own things. It wants to understand things. It seeks not worldly riches but cosmic truth. This single detail transforms the dragon from a magnificent beast into a profound philosophical symbol. It is the embodiment of the yang principle in Taoist philosophy, the active, masculine, and heavenly force, perfectly balanced with the phoenix, which represents the feminine yin. The dragon is not an adversary to be conquered by a hero. It is a guide, a source of wisdom, and a symbol of the very power that keeps the world in motion. It is a partner to humanity, a reminder that the greatest strength lies not in domination, but in harmony with the forces of the universe. But the Long's influence didn't stop at China's borders. As its story traveled across the seas and over the mountains, carried on the winds of trade and culture, it began to change, to adapt to new lands and new beliefs. In the misty mountains of Japan, it would encounter new gods and ancient spirits. There it would shed some of its scales and gain a new name, a new purpose, and in the land of the rising sun, it would find a rival for the heavens themselves. In the land of the rising sun, the dragon found its reflection not in a mirror, but in a creature of celestial fire. This was the Ho-Oh, the Japanese phoenix, an avatar of the southern sky and the virtues of the empress. Where the dragon, now known as Ryu, commanded the seas and the storms, the phoenix commanded the heavens and the sun. They were not enemies in the way a knight and a monster are enemies. They were cosmic counterparts, a divine duality. The dragon was the emperor, the phoenix his empress. Together, their dance represented the harmony of the universe, the perfect balance of yin and yang, of water and fire, of power and grace. But before it could find this balance, the dragon had to be reshaped by the islands themselves. Arriving from the mainland, it was seen as a powerful but foreign entity. The native faith of Japan, Shinto, was a world of kami, countless gods and spirits inhabiting every rock, river, and tree. For the dragon to truly belong, it had to become one of them. It found its new home not in the celestial bureaucracy of the Chinese heavens, but in the deep, unforgiving waters surrounding the archipelago. The Japanese Ryu became, first and foremost, a sea god. Its form shifted subtly. Where the imperial Chinese dragon brandished 5 claws as a sign of its supreme authority, the Japanese Ryu typically possessed only 3. The legend says that as dragons flew farther from their homeland, they lost toes. Those that reached Korea had 4. Those that made it all the way to Japan had only 3. It's a folk explanation, of course, but it speaks to a deeper truth. The Japanese dragon was a more localized, grounded, and elemental creature. It was a king, yes, but its kingdom was the ocean. And what a kingdom it was! At the bottom of the sea, in a palace called Ryugujo built from red and white coral, lived the great dragon king Ryujin. He was the master of the tides, the keeper of the jewels that controlled the ebb and flow of the ocean. He was a figure of immense power, but also of wisdom and sometimes capricious whims. Sailors prayed to him for safe passage, and fishermen left offerings for a bountiful catch. To anger Ryujin was to invite a tsunami, a typhoon, a watery grave. His palace was a place of mythic wonder, where a single day felt like a century on the surface. This is the setting for one of Japan's most beloved and melancholic tales, the story of the fisherman Urashima Taro. One day, Taro saves a small turtle from being tormented by children. The turtle, it turns out, is the daughter of the Dragon King. As a reward, she invites him to visit Ryugujo. He rides on her back, plunging beneath the waves into a world beyond imagination. He is welcomed as a hero, feasted by Ryujin himself, and lives in a state of perfect bliss. But after what feels like only 3 days, he grows homesick and wishes to see his aging mother. The princess is saddened but understands. She gives him a parting gift, a beautiful lacquered box, the Tamada Bako, but warns him never, ever to open it. Taro returns to the surface, but his village is gone. The people, the houses, the coastline, everything is different. He asks a passerby about his own family, only to be told that the fisherman Urashima Taro was lost at sea 300 years ago. In his grief and confusion, he forgets the princess's warning. He opens the box. A cloud of white smoke billows out, and in an instant, the 300 years he missed catch up to him. His hair turns white, his skin wrinkles, and his body withers into dust, a tragic testament to the gulf between the mortal world and the timeless realm of the Dragon King. The dragon's influence wasn't confined to the sea. It coiled itself around the very pillars of Japanese culture. In Buddhism, dragons were seen as protectors of the faith, guardians of temples and sacred texts. Walk into a Japanese temple today, and you are likely to find a chozuya, a water ablution pavilion, where a bronze or stone dragon spews purifying water from its mouth for visitors to cleanse their hands and spirit before entering. Look up at the ceiling of the main hall, and you might find yourself staring into the eyes of a massive, swirling dragon painted across the wooden panels, a celestial guardian watching over the worshippers below. The Great Dragon of Kenninji Temple in Kyoto took 2 years to paint and serves as a breathtaking reminder of the creature's spiritual significance. But Japan, like all cultures, understood the dragon's dual nature. For every benevolent Ryujin, there was a monster lurking in the shadows. The most fearsome of all was Yamada no Orochi, the 8-forked serpent of Koshi. This was not a wise sea god, but a primal terror. It had 8 heads and 8 tails, its body was long enough to cover 8 valleys and 8 hills, and its back was covered with moss and trees. Its eyes glowed like winter cherries, and its belly was perpetually smeared with blood. Each year, this monstrosity would descend upon the land to demand the sacrifice of a maiden. For 7 years, 7 daughters of an elderly couple had been devoured. Now the beast was coming for their 8th and final daughter. But this time a hero appeared. The storm god Susanoo, brother of the sun goddess Amaterasu, who had been exiled from the heavens. Susanoo, seeing the family's despair, offered to slay the beast in exchange for their daughter's hand in marriage. He devised a cunning plan. He had them brew 8 giant vats of the strongest sake and placed them behind 8 gates. Lured by the scent, Yamada no Orochi plunged one of its heads into each vat and drank until it fell into a stupor. As the colossal beast slept, Susanoo drew his sword and with divine fury hacked it to pieces, its blood turning the high river crimson. But the story doesn't end there. As he sliced through the creature's 4th tail, his sword struck something hard and shattered. Puzzled, he cut the tail open and found, nestled within the flesh of the monster, a magnificent sword. This was the legendary blade Kusanagi no Tsurugi, the grass-cutting sword. This sword would become one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan, the sacred treasures that legitimized the rule of the emperor, a symbol of his power and virtue, born from the heart of the nation's most terrifying dragon. So the Japanese dragon was a creature of profound contrasts. It was the serene god of the sea and the chaotic monster of the mountains. It was a guardian of Buddhist law and a force of Shinto nature. It was a symbol of imperial power, forever entwined with its fiery rival, the phoenix. It was a being that could grant timeless bliss or embody unimaginable terror. The dragon had found a home in these volcanic islands, a place of violent beauty and quiet contemplation, a culture that understood that the greatest power often lies in the balance between opposites. From the depths of the Japanese sea and the heart of its most ancient myths, the dragon's form had been perfected. But across the vast, empty expanse of the Pacific Ocean, on continents that had never heard of a dragon king or an 8-forked serpent, something astonishing was happening. Entirely alone, born from a different earth and under a different sky, another great serpentine power was unfurling its wings. It wasn't a creature of scale and claw, but of iridescent feather and razor-sharp obsidian. It was a serpent that could fly, a god that bled, a king that built empires of gold and stone in the heart of the jungle. The dragon was about to be reborn not as a myth but as a god. Across the Atlantic, in a world untouched by European knights or Chinese emperors, the serpent took to the sky not on leathery wings, but on a cloak of impossible color. This was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, a being that was not a beast to be slain, but a prime creator god to be worshipped. This wasn't a dragon of the cave, but a dragon of the cosmos, a creature that embodied the sacred, violent, and beautiful duality of existence itself. The name, in the Nahuatl language of the Aztecs, means precious feather serpent. It is a perfect description. Imagine a snake, the ultimate symbol of the earth, of rebirth and the underworld, fused with the Quetzal, a bird so divine its vibrant green and blue feathers were worth more than gold, a creature that could not be caged, for it would die of a broken heart. This was a being of 2 worlds, the earth and the sky, life and spirit, bound together in a single divine form. Unlike the dragons of the old world who hoarded treasure, Quetzalcoatl gave treasure. He was a culture hero, the bringer of civilization. But his greatest gift was not gold or knowledge. It was humanity itself. The Aztec myths tell of a time before our own, of 4 previous worlds or suns, each created and destroyed in a cycle of divine conflict. After the 4th sun was destroyed by a great flood, the world was dark and empty, and the gods were troubled. It was Quetzalcoatl who took it upon himself to restore life. To do this, he had to journey into the underworld, Mictlan, a terrifying realm of bone and shadow ruled by the skeletal lord of death, Mictlantecuhtli. His quest was to retrieve the precious bones of the people who had perished in the flood. The Lord of Death, a jealous and cunning god, agreed to give him the bones, but only if Quetzalcoatl could complete a seemingly impossible task: to travel through his kingdom 4 times while blowing a conch shell that had no holes. It was a trick, a trap. But Quetzalcoatl, the god of intellect, summoned worms to drill holes into the shell and bees to fly inside and make it drone with the sound of a trumpet. The task was complete, but Mictlantecuhtli was a god of betrayal. As Quetzalcoatl fled with the precious bundle of bones, the death god ordered his minions to dig a pit. Quetzalcoatl tripped, falling into the trap and scattering the bones, shattering them into pieces of all different sizes. Though he managed to escape the underworld, he wept at the broken remains. But the other gods encouraged him. He gathered the shattered fragments, took them to the sacred ground of Tamuanchin, and there the gods assembled. In a final, profound act of creation, Quetzalcoatl pierced his own body and let his divine blood fall upon the broken bones. And from this mixture of earthborn bone and skyborn blood, the first man and woman of our current age were born. Think about that. In this tradition, the dragon is not our ancient enemy. The dragon is our progenitor. Humanity was not made from clay or dust, but from the literal sacrifice of a god serpent. Our lives, our very existence, were bought with the blood of the dragon. As a god king, Quetzalcoatl ruled over the legendary city of Talin, a paradise on earth where cotton grew in vibrant colors, and corn grew so large a single ear was a burden for one man to carry. He taught his people the secrets of the stars, the intricacies of the calendar, the art of cutting jade and weaving feathers. He was a god of peace who disdained the practice of human sacrifice, a stark contrast to the bloodier demands of his fellow deities. But this golden age was not to last. Quetzalcoatl had a rival, a dark brother, a shadow self. Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, a god of night, sorcery, and chaos. Tezcatlipoca was jealous of Quetzalcoatl's perfect city and his beloved people. Through trickery and deceit, he held up a mirror of black obsidian to the feathered serpent, showing him his own human face for the first time. Distraught by his aged and imperfect appearance, Quetzalcoatl fell into despair. Tezcatlipoca then offered him a drink to soothe his sorrows, a milky white liquor called pulque. The peaceful god king, who had sworn off earthly vices, drank and became wildly intoxicated, breaking his sacred vows of celibacy and piety. When the morning came, Quetzalcoatl awoke filled with a shame so profound he could no longer bear to rule. He abandoned his city, his people, and traveled east to the edge of the Great Sea, the Gulf of Mexico. There, some legends say he built a funeral pyre of turquoise and immolated himself, his ashes rising to become the morning star, Venus. But another version, a version that would echo through the centuries with world-altering consequences, says he built a raft of serpents and sailed east, promising his weeping followers that one day, in the year of his birth, the year Suacatl or one reed, he would return from the east to reclaim his throne. Centuries passed. The Toltec Empire fell, and the mighty Aztec Empire rose in its place. The myth of the returning god king endured, a prophecy whispered from one generation to the next. And then in the year 1519, the year one read in the Aztec calendar, ships appeared on the eastern horizon. Ships larger than any ever seen, with sails like white clouds. From them came men with skin as pale as bone, with hair on their faces the color of the sun. They were led by a man named Hernán Cortés. For the Aztec emperor Moctezuma II, this was an existential crisis. Was this the fulfillment of the ancient prophecy? Was this pale, bearded man the returning Quetzalcoatl, come to reclaim his kingdom? Or was it something else, something far more dangerous? This hesitation, this uncertainty born from a dragon myth, may have been the single greatest advantage the Spanish conquistadors had. They were not met with the full, immediate force of the Aztec Empire, but with caution, diplomacy, and divine reverence. An empire was laid low, not just by steel and gunpowder, but by the power of its own story. The dragon that had given them life now, in a twist of tragic irony, presided over their destruction. And this feathered god was not confined to the Aztecs. To the south, in the jungle-choked lands of the Maya, he was known as Kukulkan. There, his myth was not just told but built into the very fabric of the universe. At the Great Pyramid of Chichen Itza, a temple dedicated to his name, a miracle of architecture and astronomy occurs twice a year. On the spring and autumn equinox, as the sun sets, the light and shadow play across the pyramid's northern staircase. It forms the perfect illusion of a massive, undulating serpent of light, slithering from the temple at the top all the way down to the giant stone serpent head at its base. For a few fleeting moments the god returns made not of flesh or feather, but of pure light and stone, a testament to a people who saw the dragon not in the pages of a book, but in the turning of the heavens themselves. Yet, the feathered serpent was not the only dragon of the Americas. Far to the north along the Mississippi River, the Illini people spoke of the Pyasa, a monstrous creature painted on the bluffs overlooking the water. Part man, part dragon with the horns of a deer, a scaled body, and a tail so long it wrapped around its body, it was a devourer of men, a terror that had to be slain by a great chief. And in the traditions of the Cherokee, there was the Uctina, a colossal horned serpent with a blazing diamond-like crest in its forehead that could strike a man dead with a single glance. From a benevolent creator god who bled to give us life, to a monstrous man-eater painted on a cliffside, the American dragon was a creature of profound extremes. It was a prophecy that toppled an empire, a celestial event carved in stone, a fundamental force of creation. The dragon had been a monster, a force of nature, and now a god. Its journey through human imagination was almost complete. It had conquered the ancient world, but now it faced its greatest challenge, the modern world. An age of reason, of science, of fantasy. How could a creature of myth survive in a world that claimed to no longer need it? It survived by changing its very nature. It shed its skin of literal belief and slithered into a new, more durable domain, the human imagination. As the age of reason dawned, explorers mapped the final corners of the globe, finding no dragons. Paleontologists unearthed colossal skeletons, not of fire-breathing WRMS, but of dinosaurs, creatures of science, not magic. The dragon, for a time, seemed doomed to extinction. It was demoted from a terrifying reality to a quaint superstition, a relic of a less enlightened time. Scholars dismissed it as a confused amalgamation of crocodiles, snakes, and lions. It was explained away, categorized, and filed under myth. The great beast that had terrorized saints and guarded the gates of the underworld was becoming nothing more than a footnote in a bestiary, a heraldic symbol on a dusty flag. It had lost its fire. But then something remarkable happened. In the smoke-filled skies of the Industrial Revolution, as the world became more mechanical, more rational, and perhaps a little more gray, a profound nostalgia for enchantment began to stir. And from the embers of that forgotten magic, the dragon was reborn, not as a creature of the world, but as a king of worlds yet to be imagined. Its coronation took place in a quiet study in Oxford, under the pen of a professor named J.R.R. Tolkien. When he wrote of Smaug the Golden, he wasn't just retelling an old fable. He was forging the modern dragon. Smaug was no mere beast. He was intelligent, vain, and terrifyingly articulate. He was a personality, a character driven by greed and ancient malice, whose every word was laced with cunning. He was a living catastrophe, a sentient natural disaster sleeping on a bed of gold. Tolkien took the avarice of Fafnir, the destructive power of the Beowulf dragon, and the sheer scale of ancient legend, and he gave it a voice. In doing so, he created the blueprint for nearly every fantasy dragon that would follow. He cemented the dragon as the ultimate antagonist, the final boss at the heart of the Lonely Mountain. But just as the dragon seemed forever cast as the villain, other authors began to ask, what if it wasn't? What if its power wasn't just destructive but elemental? Ursula K. Le Guin in her Earthsea cycle gave us a different kind of dragon. Her dragons were not evil. They were not good. They were simply dragons, ancient, immensely powerful, and fundamentally alien. They spoke the true speech, the very language of creation, and to them humanity was a fleeting, ephemeral thing. They were a force of nature, like a storm or a tectonic plate, and to face one was to face a truth far older and more profound than any human kingdom. Le Guin gave the dragon back its mystery, its philosophical weight. It was no longer just a monster to be slain, but a primordial power to be understood or at least respected. This shift from enemy to something more found its ultimate expression within McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern. Suddenly, the dragon wasn't the thing to be feared. It was the thing to be desired. McCaffrey's dragons were humanity's greatest allies, telepathically bonded to their riders in a symbiotic relationship of loyalty and love. They were bioengineered protectors, not mythical monsters. The dream was no longer to kill the dragon, but to ride one, to soar through the sky on the back of a magnificent, fire-breathing companion. This was a revolution. The dragon became the ultimate fantasy, a symbol not of our fears, but of our aspirations for power, for freedom, for a bond that transcended species. This trinity, Tolkien's cunning villain, Le Guin's ancient neutral, and McCaffrey's loyal companion, created the modern draconic spectrum. And from that spectrum, 1,000 new dragons took flight, conquering our popular culture. The game Dungeons & Dragons took Tolkien's idea and codified it, creating a veritable zoology of dragons. They were given colors and alignments, from the lawful good gold dragon to the cruel and tyrannical red, to the scheming, chaotic evil of the five-headed goddess Tiamat. For millions of people, the dragon became a tangible obstacle, a roll of the dice, a shared story told around a table. It became an interactive, fundamental pillar of the fantasy genre itself. Then Hollywood came calling. In the 1981 film Dragonslayer, Vermithrax Pejorative was a masterpiece of terror, a creature of pure animalistic fury that brought the primal fear of the old legends roaring back to life. But just over a decade later, in Dragonheart, Draco was a noble, witty, self-sacrificing hero, the last of his kind, who literally gives his heart to save a human. The dragon could be our worst nightmare or our noblest friend. This evolution reached its zenith with How to Train Your Dragon. Toothless is the culmination of McCaffrey's dream. He is not just an ally. He is a friend, a pet. He is playful, curious, and fiercely loyal. The story's central message is one of empathy, that the terrifying other is simply misunderstood. It completed the dragon's journey from a symbol of everything humanity must destroy to a symbol of what we must protect and understand. And then, just when we thought the dragon had been fully tamed, Game of Thrones unleashed Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion upon the world. These were not pets. They were weapons of mass destruction. They were a terrifying return to the dragon as an uncontrollable, apocalyptic force, loyal only to their mother. They blended the terrifying power of Smaug with the intense personal bond of Pern, creating something that felt both ancient and shockingly new. They were instruments of liberation and tools of tyranny, living embodiments of the idea that absolute power is both beautiful and horrifying. So why, after all these millennia, are we still so captivated? Why does the silhouette of a dragon still quicken our pulse? Because the dragon is no longer a single creature. It is a mirror. It has become the most versatile and powerful symbol in our mythological arsenal. It is a symbol of the untamable chaos that lies just beyond the borders of our orderly lives. It is the wildfire, the hurricane, the stock market crash, the force that reminds us we are not truly in control. It is the ultimate challenge, the final trial that forges heroes. It is a symbol of ultimate power and freedom. The dream of riding a dragon is the dream of breaking the bonds of gravity and society, of soaring above the mundane world, untouchable and sovereign. It is the fantasy of having the strength to protect what you love and destroy what you hate. It is a symbol of ancient wisdom. To speak with a dragon, as in Le Guin's world, is to connect with something timeless, a knowledge that predates human folly. It represents a truth that can only be found in the deep, quiet, and often dangerous places of the world. And finally, it is a symbol of ourselves. The dragon represents the untamed, powerful, and sometimes monstrous part of our own nature. Our capacity for rage and destruction, our inner Smaug, but also our capacity for fierce loyalty, profound connection, and noble sacrifice, our inner Toothless. The dragon never truly died. It just left the physical world to become the undisputed ruler of our inner one. From the swirling chaos of Babylonian myth to the sacred rivers of China, from the saint-testing fiends of medieval Europe to the complex characters of modern fantasy, the dragon has been our constant companion. It has shifted its shape and changed its meaning, but it has never left us. It is the story we tell ourselves about power, about nature, about fear, and about hope. It is a creature born of shadow and fire, but it lives on in the light of human imagination. The dragon is immortal, not because it ever drew a real breath, but because, in a way, it is the story of every breath we've ever taken in a world full of wonder and terror. It is the greatest story we have ever told, and it is a story that is far from over.